This is Charlotte Moraga of the Chitresh Das Institute. Charlotte is going to talk about her newest work, Invoking the River. Charlotte, first of all, could you talk about what inspired that work?
So this work was inspired by a sort of a triptych that I wanted to explore in the Kathak medium. So in 2014, just a few months before Guruji passed away, I had a book about Amrita Devi, the tree hugger, who the story, the story of the Kelchari massacre and how she and her daughters and many in the village hugged the trees that were being chopped down by the Maharaja, who needed to burn ash to build a palace. And it was a massacre, and the Maharaja actually felt bad about it, and he made a decree that no green trees would ever be felled in that area in Rajasthan again. And to this day, that is standing. And so Guruji loved that story, and he wanted to do a school show around that story. And then he passed away in early 2015, quite suddenly, as you know. And so it was always in the back of my mind that we really need to do that story to show, to show how one person or just a few people can make significant changes in the lives of others. So after a couple of years, we started, myself and Celine Shine Das as executive director, myself as artistic director, and Preeti Zalavadia as managing director of our school. We started the Chitresh Das Institute with the intent of carrying on his legacy and moving it forward and speaking to what's happening in our lives now and what's happening in the world now, because art is the perfect medium for bringing attention to these important things. But at the forefront of all that was to pass on the knowledge, to pass on the art form. For 20 years, I was a principal dancer in the Chitresh Das Dance Company. I tied strings with Guruji on the Ganga, the Kaneshwar temple, and right across from the Kaneshwar temple. And so the rivers in India have always held a really prominent place in my mind, in my body, and in my imagination. When we first start dancing, one of the first things I learned from Guruji at San Francisco State was the kavit, Jamuna ke tata parana, nachata kanaya, right? This story, yes. This poem, and we have in our mind there's all the lotus blossoms and the butterflies and the birds and the beauty of the river, but we don't really look at what is happening in real life in the states of the river. As you know, Yamuna is in certain areas, it's dried up. In certain areas, it's one of the most polluted rivers in the world. We have them all over here in the US, the Mississippi, and all over the world. And so how are we treating these goddesses? On the one hand, they're such they're so revered and they're worshipped, but it's always with that expectation of, what can you give me? Like, can you cleanse my sins? Can you give me water I need to survive? Can you give me water to power our power stations? What can you give me? So we take. But when we really look at the conditions of these rivers, we're not taking care of them. We expect from them, but what are we doing for them? We're not really taking care of them. We pollute them, we barrage them, we do all kinds of things. So the triptych was to really bring attention to originally we did Aranya Katha, which is not the story of Ramayana, it's the story of the forest, literally. And the trees, who is speaking for the trees, who is protecting the trees? Again, with the trees, we look at as a resource, a very valuable resource. but are we really, are we giving back at the same time? Um, and so then I did a work called Mantram, which was really about the effects of climate change on intertwined with the five elements, the Mahapanchabhuta. And so this is the third in the triptych, the third the piece that I wanted to tie it up with, and that's about the rivers. That's about water. Water is the most, one of the most important. I can't say one element is more important than the other, but it is literally life. Water is life. And so I really wanted to explore the rivers. And as you know, in the all around the world, rivers are goddesses. They have a tremendous feminine power. They have the power to create and they have the power to destroy. And we're completely dependent on them for life, for transportation, for resources, for power, everything. And many origin stories of the rivers are these goddesses that are so powerful, and they've been sent to earth, and they come so powerfully. Like the Ganga, they have to be caught in the locks of Shiva to protect to not protect, but to soften the force of the water. So this idea of the beauty, life, and the force of it was perfect to create dance around. And I had four dancers who are now adults, and they have come back. They started in our youth company, the Chitresh Das Youth Company, as children. And it's a very intense program. You have to audition in, and it's a pre-professional performing ensemble. So they had 10, 15 years of experience performing. They had completed their first solo, and they came back wanting to dance again, and they were very dedicated. And each of them was very much into this idea. And I asked them to choose one of the rivers that they can relate to, and create, research it, and write a poem that will inspire you to create a narrative. So each of them, Kritika was very much loved the idea of Alaknanda, which starts off very, in the Himalayas, and it flows with such force and power. And she loved the idea of just exploring the joy and power of the movement of the river, and she's worshipped all along her bank. So the joy is just prominent in her narrative. Another dancer, both her grandparents passed away. Vanita, her parents passed away during COVID in 2020 in India, and her parents went back to the Manikarnika, the guts, to do the rites, and they told her about it, and she kind of felt very, very sad. And I think going through this process of doing creating a dance along the banks of the Ganga and Manikarnika, and really helped her to go through that process of grieving, really helped her to heal. And what a powerful thing, if dance can be nothing else but a healing source, and as many things, what a powerful thing. And each of the dancers created, Mayuka did Kavri, where she was trapped. Her origin is she was trapped in a pot and carried around by her husband. And when we started this, Roe v. Wade was being overturned.
Right.
And she was furious. She was angry. And she was like, how are we any different? Our agency, our bodies, how are we any different? It's like we're being carried around in a pot,
Right.
and fought over, and our resources fought over. And so she really created this really intense dance that's done inside a pot, and she finally breaks free, and then she's fought over by the North and the South in terms of her resources. And again, Shruti chose the Godavari, and exploring the idea of widowhood and how the water has that power to cleanse and heal and transform the individual and hence transform society. So each of these four rivers were very prominent. So it starts off with the origin of the Ganga, and they all cascade down onto the stage. And then it ends with Sangam, where all of these four sisters come together and they evoke Saraswati. Saraswati, as you know, to us, she's the goddess of arts and dance and learning. And she is not a physical river. Maybe she was at one time, we don't know. And so they invoke her and bring her to life on the stage. And thus continues this cycle. For me, the river is a metaphor for the continuing flowing of knowledge. Guruji was so generous. He gave me so much over, 25 years that it's not my birthright. It's not for me to hold on to. I need to pass it on to whoever will receive it. And to me, the river is a perfect metaphor for that flow of knowledge. It's constantly changing. It's always been there. But and it goes out to this vast ocean, that we can know, but just a drop of.
One of the most powerful scenes to watch was when the widow broke her bangles. And initially, I thought that related to Roe versus Wade, the overturning of Roe versus Wade. Could you talk a little bit about that? What inspired that particular bit?
Yes, well, that was the undercurrent. When we created this work, that was what was happening. And all of these dancers are young. They're in their late 20s. Right. And they were very furious and angry. And me, having grown up, never taking it for granted how that this would ever not be a right, complete disbelief of it. And I think for all of us, that was an undercurrent of this whole thing is like, we need to we need to discover our power. We need to discover our power. We need to break that pot, break those bangles, break that patriarchal sort of way of using up the resources of the earth, the extraction, and women's bodies are part of that, Right. So that was a very strong undercurrent in the making of this piece.
Absolutely. So there are so many similar themes that you're exploring within this piece. And environmental degradation and the issue of climate change is a global one. You just finished a very successful run in Northern California. I attended the show at ODC in which you got a standing ovation, which you rightly deserved. Could you talk a little bit about what you hope audiences will take away from this piece in terms of their own relationship to the environment?
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, I do hope that they are moved, not just to stand on their feet, but to sort of examine, like you say, to be curious. What is the meaning of this? Why they're telling these stories? Why are they important to them? What is the meaning of them? And I think it's as we walk upon this earth, we take so much for granted, all of us. We all have different levels of privilege, of course, but we take so much for granted. And I think going back, slowing down, going back and examining how am I going forward into this earth? Do I want to just take everything I can get while I'm alive because life is short? Or do I want to think about what my grandchildren and what the future of the earth will be? And how should I go forward? How should I think about these things? Seva is a very, very important part of our tradition. How can I give back? So that, because it's Lakshmi's pot, right? You have to let it go to get it back. You have to, there's the continual cycle of energy. So I hope that people will continue to engage and examine more, as well as feel moved to do that,
Absolutely. My final question to you, you are taking the show to India next January, is that right? What are the dates? Where will you be? And what do you hope that Indian audiences take away from this story?
So we will be in India from the first 2 weeks of February, the first week of February, the end of January. I'm sorry, I don't have the exact dates right now. I know that we will be going to Delhi first, and then Kolkata and Mumbai, possibly Goa. Be nice to end up in Goa.
Yeah, absolutely.
See, and visit the ocean.
Yes, that
As
sounds
we do in our
fantastic.
dance.
Yes.
I hope that Indian audiences take away the same thing that I hope American audiences take away, that they are moved, that they engage with the issues and they examine their lives and how they're moving on this earth. And they examine their relationship to water and the earth. But performing in India is wonderful because obviously they get more things, especially with Kathak. And I hope also my Guruji was known for innovating within tradition. And I like to think that I am following his footsteps. I try to push the boundaries of the art form. Just the fact that our composer and our music is a Western piano. It's very
Yes.
minimalist music. It's only piano and tabla. And just the fact that we are exploring those boundaries and trying to communicate across borders, across genres, I think also makes us push our art form forward as well. So I hope that they appreciate how we are also innovating within tradition. We're keeping certain very salient forms of the art form, but pushing those boundaries and trying to communicate to in different ways so that others can access it.
Yeah, and I forgot to ask you about Utsav Lal, the composer and pianist, who has such brilliant, it works so perfectly for this piece. It's haunting and lyrical and invokes so many emotions. Could you talk a little bit about working with Utsav to create this piece?
Yeah, Utsav, I met Utsav in 2019, and we met over a Mexican hot chocolate in the Mission District in San Francisco.
That's
And
great.
after talking to him with just 10 minutes, I knew I wanted to collaborate with him because he has a big wealth of perspective and experience. He has played, he plays piano he plays ragas, and he tries to get that out of the piano, which is not a traditional instrument. So he's constantly creating. He's constantly creating ways and looking at sound in different ways. He's also played with lots of different musical influences, Irish and many different jazz. And so he has such a broad perspective and a very unique perspective on sound and music. And yet he has a deep knowledge of the classical tradition. He has a deep knowledge of Hindustani music. So I thought that was absolutely necessary to do this piece in the way that I wanted to do it. And he is absolutely wonderful to work with. He's very thoughtful. He's very he continues every time he plays the score. Of course, he incorporated our ideas, he incorporated our narratives, he was very curious about it. He incorporated compositions, bowls that I wanted to use as well. He also accompanied the multimedia aspect by Alga Raghuram, which was the Sutradhar, and kind of wove together the stories throughout the piece. And I wanted to give that its own place too. So there's no dancing happening at the time of the multimedia of the film and the poetry. And there's only the accompaniment of the piano, and it's very quiet and it's very thoughtful. And so it creates other worlds. It really creates other worlds. And I feel like that's what he does. He creates other worlds when he plays. And every time he plays the score, it's slightly different. There's quite a bit of improvisation in it, which is very hard to do when you have a choreography and a narrative like this.